Okay, so here we are, just as the drum would normally be with the snare wires on and everything like that. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the snare wires so I can tune the head efficiently. So the bottom head of the snare drum, we want to do the same thing we do with the top head. We want to slack it off, especially if it's a brand new head. We want to tune it up. We want to give it a good tight tension on it. Slack it back, or slacken it off. Finger tighten it. Make sure if you change the head on your snare drum, you put an ambassador snare weight on the. Sorry. If and when you change the head on your snare drum, you should probably change it maybe every 2 to 3 times you change the top head, depending how much you use the drum and how hard you hit. But make sure you get what's called a snare side head. It's extremely thin. If you put the wrong type of head on the bottom of the drum, it'll sound terrible because it'll be too thick. You need a very thin drum head to the bottom of the snare drum so that it picks up the snares are able to pick up all the notes that you're playing and sound really crisp. If the head's too thick, it'll just sound really boxy. So this head's pretty much in tension right now. So what I'm going to do is show you a few tricks on how to get a better sound of every snare drum and also alleviate the cursed snare buzz, which we all get from the drum kits. When you hit a rack tom or a floor tom, sometimes the snares will buzz like crazy. That's called sympathetic resonance, which means that particular tone that those toms are making or that drum is making happens to be very similar to the tuning of the snare drum, and the snares are buzzing because the drum's going vibrating. So there's a few things you can do to alleviate that. Obviously, tuning the rack tom or the floor tom, whichever drum is causing the most snare buzz, out, tuning it up or down a little bit to try and alleviate the problem, and of course adjusting the snare tension. You don't want to go so far with that you're going to really change the sound of something you don't like. So you have to kind of experiment with that. And the most important thing I can tell you about that is snare buzz is inherent in a drum set. You will always get some of it. It's okay to have some of it. You don't need to have tons of it, but it is certainly very common, and you will always have some. It's just the nature of the beast. So one thing you can do to alleviate that, and also to improve the snare response in your drum, the 4 lugs that sit where the snares run, which is called the snare bed. If you look at the shell, you'll see there's actually a dip in the shell right where that snare wires run, and that's designed to give the snare wires a place to sit on the drum head, gives it a little more contact with that drum head. I like to tighten these 4 lugs quite tight to improve the snare response, because it increases the tension of the plastic of the drum head basically along that spot. And I'll also slack off these ones a little bit. They'll still be relatively tight, but they'll be slacked back more than these ones are anyways. So what that's going to do is it's going to create a really tight spot here in the drum head, and it's going to be a little less tension here. In fact, if you look across the hoop itself, it'll almost look like a saddle because it's tighter here and looser here, so it's actually going to bow out a little bit. That's okay. That's sort of what we're going for. The snare head I usually make quite tight because it's going to help give you better snare response. It's going to sound crisper sounding, especially on less expensive drums. They tend to have a real boxy sound to them out of the when you first put the drum. So I find by giving this head a real good, nice tight tension to it, and by doing the 4 lug trick, it will increase the snare response and make it sound less boxy. You can save a lot of drums that sound okay by doing that, it seems. So we've done that now. Now when we put our wires back on, in this case, they're already pretty well set up. But when you're putting the wires in the drum, you have to make sure that they're pretty much dead center. That you don't want them sitting, like this, or obviously the same on this side. And make sure that if there's a weld on the wires, which there always is, like this is always down on the drum. Weld side down always. The logo on the wires will also help because if you have it upside down, it'll sound terrible. The wires won't contact the head properly.